Hi Gary, can you tell me your name and what you do at SAS?
Sure. My name is Gary Ciampa and I work in the Platform Research and Development Division in Cary at our world headquarters. And primarily we're responsible for systems management, performance related activities for the SAS architecture.
Great, and you're going to present on the HP Grid. Can you tell me about what that product does?
Sure. So we have a product that's under development in research and development. We're working with our partners at Hewlett-Packard to implement a high-performance grid computing environment called HP Grid. And essentially that is a technique that SAS is using internally to solve high analytic or high compute performance problems where we can distribute workload across 100 or 200 nodes and drastically reduce the elapsed time for computing or analytic problems that customers are trying to solve.
Oh, that's great. And you have a diagram here with the architecture. Could you give me a brief overview of what those components are?
Sure. As we look through the architecture, we have the hub of the architecture is our SAS metadata server, and that contains things like the credentials for user ID authorization, performance, access, and those things. That handles most of the back-end information related to, like I said, credentials, authorization, and data libraries. The SAS applications that can participate in the grid include the Enterprise Miner, Enterprise Guide, or DI Studio, where you can surface this through our web application tier, where folks can submit workloads through a web browser and then perform the high-end analytics. And most of the heavy lifting for this particular architecture comes in this compute server environment that we see on the bottom left. We take the workload, we take the data, and then we'll split that up across multiple nodes to try to solve that analytic problem.
So if I were a SAS programmer and I have, I don't know, several procs in base SAS, will this environment be able to process all that in the multi-threaded methods?
So the way our base SAS analytic engine works is most of our procedures and analytics are multi-threaded. So if you're taking advantage of a processor that has multiple cores, multiple CPUs, as those procs run, they will split that problem up into multiple threads of execution. The HP Grid environment is a little different, where we have a special proc called HP Grid that will actually spread this other workload across all the environments, and it kind of encapsulates all the analytic work.
Oh, that's cool. So if I were to have a specialized SAS stat proc or maybe a proc IML type, will it be able to handle those?
The specific procs will be multi-threaded, and then they will get farmed out across the HP Grid environment depending on that workload and how that workload can be aggregated or separated for doing the workloads.
If I were to have a series of programs specifically running, say, in a Unix environment versus Windows, what are the requirements on the server side, and maybe specifically on the hardware too, in order for this to work?
So we're running the HP Grid environment is running on a specialized hardware infrastructure that we're partnering with HP, and it's running on Hewlett-Packard blade architectures, and we're splitting that across. So whether you're a Windows or Unix environment, this architecture is going to run in the HP Grid environment on a Linux environment.
Okay.
But your clients, your web applications, or your thin and thick clients, they can still be on Windows or Unix, whatever your system of choice is.
So if I get this running on Linux, when can I expect this to be available as a product, or is it still in the works, and what is it going to be called?
Okay, so we had our opening session last night, Sunday night, and we did a demo. We're working with a couple vendors to develop the architecture and develop the platform, and most likely it'll be at around the SAS 9.3 timeframe. We may have some interim updates in our software to allow this to work earlier, but that would probably only be for a few special customers.
And what is that going to be called at that time?
Oh, it's going to be called HP Grid. Is high performance grid computing is really the product.
And is that related to HP in terms of Hewlett-Packard at all?
We have a partnership with Hewlett-Packard, and our initial deployment is going to be deploying our SAS HP Grid, high performance grid, on Hewlett-Packard hardware. As we evolve the architecture and evolve the features, we will then work with other hardware vendors to deploy the HP Grid solution.
Great. All right, thanks a lot, Gary.
You're welcome.